Those are the days. All right. Is Cam good to go, Grady? Let's bring him in.
He's good
if
to
he
go.
is, let's bring him in. Cam Robinson. Cam, what time do kids get out of school these days?
Oh man, it varies, right? My kid's in elementary school, so he's off at like 2:30. It's an early finish for them.
Interesting. And then what? It changes in high school? Like I was in high school like 2 years ago, it felt, and it was 3:00 all the time.
Yeah, just last week. Some high schools you're not done till 3:30. Like it's a wide spread these days, boys. Yeah, it's crazy out there.
Wow. Okay. How crazy has Tom Willander's first season been with BU? It's been up and down. It feels like we've heard mixed reviews from various people, depending on who you talk to. What's your take on Tom Willander's season so far?
It's been a tough transition, I would say, but I think that we should keep in mind that the jump from the J20 to the NCAA is massive. Like the juniors in Sweden to playing against 23, 24, 25-year-olds in the NCAA, these kids are basically pros, a lot of them already, physically stronger, more mature, the difference in the size of the ice. It's, he's done okay, I would say. The skating is still sublime. It's really, really nice. The production's been good. He's playing on a BU team that jacks points. So, the fact that he has a good handful isn't too surprising. But among, U19 defenders, he's just trailing a couple of top eligible kids for this coming draft. The hands are a concern. He's been making a lot of errors with that, trying to try anything, and he'll kind of lose the handle. He's missing some reads on some outlet passes. I haven't liked the way that he's been able to transition the puck outside of skating it out of trouble. So I think that, Canucks fans probably don't want to hear that too much, that they're kind of their gem on the blue line prospect, someone that they selected over a kid like Zach Benson and some of these other players that are looking that they could be high end forwards, that he's not off to the quickest start. But I mean, he's a freshman. He's still really young. We knew that coming over there, it was going to be a transition. It was going to be a difficult one to start. I would have liked to see him clean it up throughout the season, but he kind of looks to be about the same player he was 2 or 3 months ago. But patience is going to be key. He's kind of a trendsetter here. He's a pioneer going from that Swedish junior to the NCAA. Not a lot of kids do it. We're hearing rumors that Alexander Zetterberg, no relation to the famous Zetterberg, but that he's going to do the same thing, that he's going to leave the J20 and he's going to go head over to the NCAA and probably play for BU next year. So Willander's kind of setting the stage for more Swedes to do that, which is cool anyways.
For Jonathan Lekkerimäki, what's the highest probability outcome for how good he'll be in his prime?
So I've been pretty steadfast in my assessment of Lekkerimäki, is that I think he's going to be more of a second line winger that maybe won't drive play for you, but can be, not necessarily a passenger, but someone who can find his spots and he can score goals and has that one-shot goal scoring ability. But then he can be a real weapon on your top power play unit. Now, I will say the best thing that's happened in his development so far is he's added some snarl to his game, like a legitimate amount. When I was in Sweden there for the World Juniors, I was legitimately impressed with how hard he was going in on the forecheck, how his board battles, he was getting in there, he's mucking up, he was going hard to the net front, taking some abuse, because the knock on him before was to perimeter. Like, he was forced to the outside, he was kept out there, he's fairly slight, and he didn't really have that battle in him to go into those hard areas. So the fact that he's adding that to his game, and that's transitioned back to the SHL. I didn't catch his playoff game this morning, but it's going to get tighter and tighter as the playoffs ramp up here too. So we'd like to see him continue that, get a good, strong off season of training, come over to North America next year and get into the pro game over here. There is a chance that he could be, maybe not Marcus Naslund, but that type of player, a first line goal scorer. That's the very top of his ceiling, is that he could be a 40 goal scorer. But probably the more realistic outcome for him is like, 25, 30 goal guy that can really be a weapon on your top unit. And then you hope you get enough out of him at 5-on-5 too.
Well, when you describe that, a player who is maybe more of a complementary player in a top 6 role, can score as a one-shot scorer, I think of Brock Besser comes to mind. How similar or different would you compare Lekkerimäki and Besser as prospects?
Yeah, I'd say that Besser, the foot speed was always kind of a limiting factor for him as he was coming up, but he always found a way into the middle of the ice and he could uncork that shot. He was maybe a little bit smarter with his ability to kind of overcome the limitations with his skating. Lekkerimäki doesn't really have those same limitations. His skating's not bad. It's better than Brock's was for sure at the same age. So his is that it's just he needs to be able to maximize all of his skills and really kind of get in there and muck it up. But that's not a terrible comparison statistically, anyways. Is that we could be looking at a similar thing where Brock's having a career year this year. He'll probably get 40, maybe 45 with lesser assists, and Lekkerimäki could have that kind of juice long term too.
For Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, he's coming over. We know he's coming to Abbotsford now. What should the expectations be for him? And the reason I'm asking this is because you brought up the transition for Willander from the J20 to the NCAA. But this is a guy coming from the Allsvenskan to the AHL. What's that transition going to be like? Like, what should expectations be like for Elias Pettersson in Abbotsford?
Well, I mean, the expectations can be muted because he's a youngster coming over at the end of the season to play in the AHL, and so they should be fairly low. But at the same time, I don't expect that transition to be nearly as difficult as it's been for Willander because of the style and the role that he plays. He's just a pit bull out there. Like, he is mean and hard to play against. You don't want to go into the corners with this kid. He practices his hitting in the warm-ups before games on his own teammates. They run down the line and he just blasts them all. He's a physical kid, and it's kind of a meat and potatoes game, which should transition really nicely to the AHL, which is a meat and potatoes league. There's not a lot of ice out there. The skill levels, so high, but not quite NHL level high. So the time and space is taken away. It can be a little bit sloppy. So he's probably going to get a bit of a wake-up call to some speed on the outside when he comes over. But, he has a good pivot. He has good four-way mobility. But I think the straight up and down north-south game that he plays should transition fairly effectively. Again, we're just going to get him in the lineup. They're going to get him in there and get his feet wet, and so that he has a better understanding of what he needs to do next season. And I think that there's a very real chance that this kid could step in and be a top 4 guy in Abbotsford next year, and then, have a full season like that and be knocking on the door for NHL minutes. He's not that far away.
There were quite a few teams at this year's deadline that traded away a first-round pick, including the Canucks. What does the, from 20s onward of this year's draft kind of look like? Is it a bit of a weaker year?
Yeah, it's not a down year, but it has less pizzazz, less cachet. Some of these other years, you can look at some of these players coming out of 15 and beyond that you're like, they have a wart or two, whether it's size or skating or perimeter play or whatever, but they have this like high upside if everything breaks right. There's not a ton of those guys in this draft once you get out of the top 10 or 12. Of course, there's always going to be some surprises, probably some kid picked in the 60s that might end up like the 3rd best player in the draft. But nothing obvious. At this point, it's going to be like most years when you're picking in the 20s that you're throwing a dart. You're going to find someone that has a couple of skills, maybe a differentiator, whether it's their shot or their vision or their two-way ability, their strength, and that you're like, this can be an NHL trait. Let's build around it. So that's where you trust your scouting staff that they're going to have some eyes on a lot of these players, and then someone's going to go to bat for somebody and be like, we think that we can work with this package and turn them into X, Y, or Z. Because you won't be looking at a guy being like, that's a top 6 winger, that's a top 4 defenseman. They just won't be available at that point of the draft.
Cam, what did you make of the Canucks trade deadline? They choose not to trade any of their prospects away. Like, what did you think of their deadline as a whole, the NHL Canucks?
I was fine with it. I mean, obviously everybody's looking at the kind of the arms race going on in the West there and being like, they got to do something. They need to keep adding. And obviously it would have been great to add another top 6 winger. I'm sure they would have been thrilled to do that, or a number 4, 5, 6 defenseman, someone that can actually play 15 to 20 minutes a night on that blue line. But, they did their heavy lifting early, right? Obviously they got Lindholm. It hasn't broken right yet, but that's why you get him early, is that you hopefully get rid of that hiccup time, and then he can maybe figure it out in the playoffs. Zadorov and bringing in Casey DeSmith early and Lafferty, they've kind of did their work ahead of time, probably paid a little less except for Lindholm to do so at those stages. And so I think that they feel comfortable with the team. I mean, the record speaks for itself. They've been excellent against top teams. So they have to trust kind of the chemistry that they have in the room, and that the cap space was kind of king at the end of the day.
Cam, in your mind, who is the Canucks MVP this year?
Yeah, this one's easy for me. It's Quinn Hughes. I think he's leads all defensemen in points and even strength points, and he's he's their leader on the blue line. When he's going, the whole team's going. When he's not, you can see it's kind of a bit of a struggle. Should win himself his first Norris. I mean, he could be up for the Hart legitimately this year. He'll probably, he probably won't be a finalist, but he could be a guy in that, 4, 5, 6 spot for a Hart Trophy. So for me, he's the kind of the beating heart on this team. It's been great to see him do it as his first year as captain too. So yeah, no, he's the MVP for me.
All right, well, we were going to do that for our next segment, and Harmon and I came in the studio, and we were like, who's the MVP? And both of us think it's Quinn Hughes. So it might not be super interesting now that all three of us are agreeing that Quinn Hughes is the MVP. Thanks so much, Cam. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
Of course, boys. Thanks for having me.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.